So I wanted to do this series called The 17 Things I've Learned in Real Estate Over the Last 17 Years. There's so many tips and tricks of the real estate business, but being in this industry for creeping on 2 decades now, there's some real kind of life lessons that I've learned. I just want to kind of briefly share the top ones. So the first one that I just can't do without touching on immediately is how important communication is in this industry. There's a lot of people involved in a real estate transaction. When you start looking at the lender, the surveyor, the underwriter, the title company, the home inspector, the real estate agent, usually unless it's like a mom and pop, usually they're running a team. There's typically 11, 12, 13 different people involved in that real estate transaction. So managing all those people, keeping the communication tight and crisp is very challenging, especially when it comes to relaying that information back to the client. Not everyone does what they're supposed to do, and not everybody does it in the timelines they're supposed to. And unfortunately, a lot of steps involved in this transaction rely on previous steps. So one of the most common frustrations is everybody wants to know what their final numbers are before closing. In a perfect world, we'd have that a week in advance, but unfortunately, life doesn't always work that way. So for instance, in order to get those final numbers, we need to get them from the title company. Well, the title company can't produce the final numbers until they have the final package and the approval from the lender. And the lender can't send them the final package until oftentimes they're waiting for last minute docs or verification of employment. Oftentimes they're waiting for things themselves. So it's this whole chain, and each person is waiting for the person before them. So it gets a little bit complicated and it can be frustrating. Our job is to help communicate and to mitigate the risk along the way. Unfortunately, there's no way to eliminate risk. We can only reduce it through communication and monitoring the process. I always tell people the deal's not done until you walk out the door with the keys or with the check, because unfortunately, a buyer or a seller can get hit by a bus or have a heart attack. There's no way to guarantee those things won't happen. But the further down the pike you get, the less likely they are. So it gets safer and safer the further you get. There are definitely those certain sticking points that we know to look out for. We know that the home inspection, that's a really big one. There's a lot of variables involved in that equation. There's a lot of contractors, that are involved oftentimes after the home inspection. There's a lot of follow-up inspections. Appraisals are always, especially in this market, are a little bit of a wild card. You don't know what the appraisal is going to be until it's done. Now, some situations are a little more vulnerable to volatility with the appraisals, others aren't. But we kind of know where to look and what the red flags are. The biggest lesson that I've learned in this communication arena is when there's red flags, to let the client know about the red flags, because there's nothing worse than calling a client up and saying, hey, we have this unfixable problem, and the client just did not see it coming or not have any information leading up to it. But when those situations do present themselves, the best method that I have learned is put all options and potential solutions on the table, no matter how crazy they are, and just systematically and slowly start eliminating the worst options to determine what's left and what's viable. Keeping people involved and communicating along the way and letting them know about these red flags greatly reduces the stress in the equation. That's probably the number one thing I've learned in selling real estate for 17 years, is how important quick, clear, and concise communication is to lowering the stress of a real estate transaction. I'm Kyle Ness with Ness Brothers Real Estate. Thanks for watching.